Kayleigh, the president said this week the only way we lose this election is if the election is rigged. It begs the question, does the president believe there's any circumstance under which he could lose the election fairly?
The president believes he's done a great job for the American people, and he believes that will show in November. He believes that voter fraud is real, in line with what we see all across the country, particularly with mail-in ballots, which are prone to fraud.
Yes. Thanks very much, Kayleigh. Two questions for you. Firstly, given the president's tweet on Goodyear and lashing out at them, is the Beast still going to be using Goodyear tires?
I'm not going to comment on security matters.
Okay, and then I want to follow up with a question that I asked the president last week, but he didn't answer. I asked him about QAnon, so I wanted to know, have you ever heard the president talk about QAnon, and what does he think of the conspiracy theory?
No, I've never heard of that. There's a lot of media focus on that, but certainly never heard of that from the president.
Yes.
Kayleigh, just a follow-up on what my colleague said over there with regard to the president saying, make sure to get out and vote because the only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Is the president saying if he doesn't win this election that he will not accept the results unless he wins?
The president has always said he'll see what happens and make a determination in the aftermath. It's the same thing he said last November. He wants a free election, a fair election, and he wants confidence in the results of the election, particularly when you have states like Nevada doing mass mail-out voting to their voting rolls. And when they tried this in the primary, it was a massive failure. Ballots were piled up in trash cans. Ballots were pinned to apartment dartboards. And with that being the system, the president wants to take a hard look at this and make sure that these are fair election results and not subject to fraud. Yes.
Can you tell us if the White House has reached out to Pelosi or the Democrats to talk over the next couple of days about stimulus?
Yeah, so I have no updates on the personal conversations that we've been having, but what I'll say is this, is I know the Speaker is interested in potentially a skinny bill with post office funding, but what we want here at the White House is we're certainly open to post office funding. We did, after all, offer that $10 billion that was turned down, so we're open to that, but what we want to see in there is relief for the American people who are hurt through no fault of their own. For unemployed Americans, we want to see enhanced unemployment insurance. PPP, we want to see small businesses get taken care of. That money goes directly to payroll, so to pay workers and thus keep jobs. And we're interested in seeing stimulus checks go out to the American people as well.
On the post office, are you able to share if the White House is open to the $25 billion that the Democrats are proposing, or is $10 billion the cap?
No, we don't have a cap. We're certainly open to looking at the $25 billion, but we want included in there relief for the American people that thus far Speaker Pelosi has been entirely uninterested in, as this president has taken unilateral action to protect Americans subject to eviction, to protect Americans who are unemployed, to protect Americans via a tax cut through payroll deferral. So this president's taken action. Still, we're waiting on a reckless Speaker Pelosi to get back and do her job.
Yes. Just to follow up on that, and then I have another question. Are there other things that the president could do in the realm of the executive action to address this problem with the Postal Service to ensure that they've got sufficient funding? Is there anything that he could do to sort of fill the gap?
So the post office does have sufficient funding through 2021, and they do currently have cash on hand. They've been given that $10 billion line of credit through the CARES Act, so that's important to note. And look, we're looking at the post office funding to do with Speaker Pelosi, but that must also include money for our hardworking Americans as well. And the president, just to underscore this, mentioned yesterday that he wants to protect postal workers. These are great, hardworking Americans, and he wants to make the post office solvent and to protect those post office jobs. And he mentioned Amazon needing to raise the price of packages for Amazon as a way to help the solvency with the post office.
Just follow up. So, with the recent agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, there is great interest on the part of the Emiratis to purchase F-35s. What is the president's position on selling those high-end aircraft to the Emiratis at this point, and would that require congressional changes to remove the qualitative military edge that is guaranteed to Israel at this moment?
So we don't confirm or comment on proposed defense sales or transfers until they're formally notified to Congress. To circle back on your first point, too, about post office funding, I did want to highlight a piece that was written by Ruth Goldway, who's a retired chairwoman and commissioner of the U.S. Postal Regulatory Commission. I believe it was in the New York Times. And she said, quote, that the post office has access to about $25 billion in cash. Its own forecasts predict that it will have enough money to operate into 2021. So this notion that there's this emergency for which Nancy Pelosi needs to rush back to Capitol Hill to solve is a farce. It is false. The real thing that's happening here is Nancy Pelosi is feeling pressure from her members, from her constituents, because she's not delivered relief for the American people, and President Trump has.